Michael. Michael. Engineering Solutions. turnout.
Massive turnout. And I see Alicia. I think she waved at me earlier and I kind of liked it because I wasn't sure it was her. Well, so I should have come in from the other side instead on that side. Would have made more sense.
I was going to say, I'm not letting you come through this way.
I knew you were going to come through this way. So I didn't like to find out what it is. It's fine.
Ko tēnei whakamoemiti mō ngā ringoera, ngā kai whakarite o te hui nei, ki hau kainga o tēnei wahi nā te whātaro o rā kei tēnā koutou. Ki ngā manuhiri ko nei, haere, nā reira kia tātou, kia pai te kōrero nei, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou. 228 days. I'm sure you've all got one of those calendars at home. Each morning you wake, just as the dawn breaks, you etch out yet another date as we count down to the 2023 general election. Some people said 228 days. That's far too early to be holding an election debate. But I say bugger that. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first election debate for the 2023 New Zealand general election. Oh, time will lead us to it. This is the second official debate for the 2023 beating things up from time to time. Not those of us on Q&A. I should say, by the way, kia ora, my name's Jack, I'm the host of Q&A on TVNZ, one of the few linear TV shows whose ratings are actually increasing! I know every Sunday, 9 AM, you're there. Watch it live! Now, we do sometimes have a habit of kind of, maybe throwing a bit more weight behind moments than we necessarily should. But if you consider not only the political environment, not only the global, geopolitical, economic environment, but the environment in which we find ourselves right now, I think you will agree this is a particularly important juncture. Inflation in New Zealand is at 7.2%. There are labour constraints all over the board. Fingers crossed, if things don't improve. The upside to that is that you guys won't have any problems finding a job when you finish your degrees. We have been pummeled. We have seen our biggest city brought to its knees by an unprecedented storm, which the Met Service had absolutely no idea was about to bear down on us and cost us hundreds of homes. We've seen some of New Zealand's most fertile soils, entire communities completely smashed by a cyclone in the last few days. Not only that, I'm not sure if you've seen the news, it looks increasingly likely that China will consider arming Russia, which means we will, in all likelihood, have a proxy war between our biggest trading partner and one of our closest geopolitical allies within the next few weeks. Good times. That means that the decisions and the policies and the visions presented by the candidates we have today are of particular importance, not only to all New Zealanders, but of massive importance to the New Zealanders who can vote and who are most likely to be living with the consequences of these decisions for the longest time. That's you. Now, in a couple of minutes, I will introduce the candidates. I'll explain how tonight's going to work. Before we introduce the candidates, though, I just want to turn back time a couple of months. The last debate we had here was a memorable event for many reasons. It was held before the local body elections. We had several mayoral candidates who came out and gave us their vision for Tāmaki Makaurau. And it ended with one of the candidates, or two of the candidates, but one in particular, ended up being egged here live on stage. So I thought that had a particular flavour to the evening. He said to me that he was insulted that someone would waste eggs in this economy. But can we please give a warm welcome back to Ted Johnson of the New Conservatives? Before I do that, please give a massive welcome to Harry and Alicia from the Auckland University Debating Society.
Look, we're well aware that we'd like to get started on the debate, but while we've been running these events for more than 130 years, it's safe to say the ones we've run over the last 3 years have been a little bit strange. And while we're incredibly proud of the work that we've done over those years, we're extremely excited to welcome everyone back to our first wholly in-person debate since the start of COVID. And if you like what you see here, or you've got any questions, we'll be up at the stall at the back afterwards. Come have a chat to us, always happy to, and we'd love to see you as a member for this year. I'm really excited to hand back over to Jack Tame, and thank you to all of the candidates for their time this evening.
Sorry, Alyssa. Thank you very much, Harry. Thanks for organising today. The way this will work is we're going to give each of the candidates a quick opportunity to introduce themselves, talk a little bit about their party's vision, their party's respective vision. Then I'm going to throw a little curly question at them, nothing too neat, nothing too cool. I'll throw that at them, they can answer that. And then we're going to focus on 3 subject areas. So we're going to talk about the economy, we're going to talk about the environment and climate change, and then we're going to talk about housing. But what I've encouraged each of the candidates to do is to keep things moving. As much as we all love politics, as much as we all love debating policy, we don't want to be here till 2 o'clock in the morning. So I've reminded them that a quick debate is a good debate, and if we can get through things relatively quickly, it should leave us some time for some questions from the floor at the end, which are likely to be nice and interesting. One other quick note, if we need an overflow room, apparently OGGB4 is the overflow room, it's downstairs. I'm not sure if that was the OGGB4 or just the OGGB4. Helen, do you know what OG means? I do have a curly question on that in a couple of minutes. Anyway, I think I'll go through one by one and introduce the candidates. So the question I'm going to be asking them is if they can give me a succinct vision for what a vote for their party will mean for New Zealand within the constraints of an MMP government environment. I think that's really important to point out, so I don't want anyone promising they're going to single-handedly change the world. It has to be somewhat of a realistic vision, and then after each of the candidates has given us their vision, I'll give them a quick question. First of all, please welcome the Minister of Transport, the Minister for Auckland, the Minister for Immigration, the Minister for Workplace Relations and Safety, the Honourable Michael Wood!
Been to. If your community is anything like mine in Mount Roskill, you would have seen how amazingly people came together in some of the worst of times over the last few weeks as we dealt with the devastation of the floods and Cyclone Gabrielle. Consistently in my community, people went above and beyond and looked out not just for themselves and their own families, but for the people of their streets, the people in their communities, and helped in any way that they could. What we saw in the response to those floods was the fact that when we deal with tough stuff, the way we get through is to focus on we, not me. And if you want a very simple synopsis of what the Labour Party stands for, our values and our visions, and the kind of community, that society that we want to build, and we'll keep building if we're re-elected, that's what it's about. It's about the fact that as we face a whole range of challenging issues, whether it's dealing with the cost of living crisis that people are facing, dealing with those long-standing issues around housing, dealing with child poverty and dealing with that overarching crisis that our whole planet faces of climate change. We only get through those things if we have an approach that's about all of us working together. And so the Labour Party stands for making sure that we take things all together, that we invest in decent public health and education for all of us, instead of tax cuts for a few at the top. That we turn away from those notions that have sometimes held sway in our society in the past, that government doesn't have a place, that we're just there as isolated individuals. Because you cannot deal with a planetary level of crisis like climate change just by individuals doing things by themselves. We have to come together as a country and take practical action to reduce our emissions across transport, across agriculture, across industry, and every part of our community. The Labour Party stands for the fact that every single person should be treated with dignity and respect and should be able to achieve their potential in life. So we're proud of the fact that we've lifted 60,000 kids out of poverty, but we know that there are any kid that lives in poverty, that is one too many. So we'll continue investing to make sure that families have got decent wages through the minimum wage and fair pay agreements and lifting benefits where we can, so that people have got that dignity and can make some choices in their own lives. As I said at the beginning, it's about we, not me. That has always been the vision, that has always been the history of the Labour Party. That's what we've done under Jacinda Ardern, it's what we're doing under Chris Hipkins, and it's what we'll do for New Zealand if we're elected again this year with your support. Kia ora.
My question for the Minister. You promised to fix the housing crisis. You said the climate change is the nuclear-free issue of this generation. You promised shovels in the ground for light rail. You promised 100,000 homes under Kiwi Bill. You promised to reform the polytechs. Housing is still some of the most unaffordable in the world. Our emissions are more or less flat. Light rail rollout has been slow. Kiwi Bill and the polytech reform was a disaster. Labour's been in power for 5 years, including 2 in the majority government. Why should voters trust Labour's campaign promises when it hasn't kept them?
But we're also the party that recognises and is pretty blunt about the fact that none of these things have got magical solutions. We had a housing crisis that built up over 30 or 40 years, and I'll just speak to that one particular one as an example. The thing that we've done in housing has been to build. And for the first time in Auckland's history, first time in the last 40 years in Auckland, we're now building enough houses to actually keep up with the fact that our population's been growing. And so what we started to see over the last year or two has been house prices and rents actually beginning to do what they need to do and need to keep doing, and that's beginning to moderate and ease off. Is it enough for now? No, of course it's not. But these things don't get solved overnight. They don't even get solved in 3 or 4 or 5 years. They require sustained effort. So in my community, in Rossville South, that's why we're investing in state housing. The last government sold off state houses as that housing crisis unfolded. We're building more. We're building the more affordable houses that are actually giving teachers and other people in our community a first start. We've done work to improve renters' rights, because if people are living in rental accommodation, they should have some decent rights and should be given a reason of being asked to move on. All of that's been opposed, every single one of those measures, by the other side of politics. These things aren't easy to do, there's no quick fix, but we'll keep building houses and we'll keep doing what it takes to deal with this housing crisis.
Michael Wood, thank you very much. Please welcome Nationals Chris Bishop.
I thank the University of Auckland Debating Society for hosting us here tonight. It's great to see such a big audience. National's pitch for this election is that after 6 years of good intention and ambition, you have not seen a government focused on delivery. And National is a government, if you put your trust in us, that will get things done for New Zealand. Michael Wood talked about Labour's vaulting ambition on things like housing, things like climate change, things like infrastructure resilience. But when you look across Labour's record over the last 5 to 6 years, it is a sorry one. We all remember the 100,000 Kiwi Bill houses they promised, and Mr Wood says, well, it's a 30 to 40 year problem, we don't propose magical solutions. Actually, that's exactly what Labour did propose at the 2017 election. They said they'd build 100,000 homes. They said they'd build light rail from Mount Roskill to the CBD by 2020. And here we are in 2023, and only just the other day did Michael turn the first soul and do something to try and show some form of progress. So we've seen a government that is high on rhetoric, high on ambition, wants the right things for New Zealand, but doesn't know how to do it. And my pitch to you is that there is a better alternative, and that is the National Party of Democracy to Lights and Nicholas. We're running on 5 things. One is taking action on the cost of living. Inflation is at a 30-year high, 7.2%. You in your lifetimes have never seen inflation at this level, and you will all know it because you feel it when you go to the dairy, or you go to the supermarket, or you pay your rent. You will all feel it. So we need to take action on the cost of living. Secondly, we need to lift incomes, because real wages in this country, that's wages after adjustments for inflation, have been falling for the last 2.5 years, and you will all feel that as well. So it's important that we lift incomes for all New Zealanders, students, beneficiaries, people on welfare, people in low-paid work. It is important we lift incomes for all.
You're opposed to minimum wage increases?
No, we're not opposed to minimum wage. In unison to pass through Parliament at the end of 2021 medium density residential standards that are now seeing much more housing being.
Are you going to stick with those?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's right. We do have to build out of our housing costs. It's not rinky-dink schemes like Kiwi Bill, promising 100,000 when we built 4%. It is building more and funding infrastructure. And that's the third point, is building infrastructure for the future, and climate resilience is a really important part of that, and we can all think of what's going on the East Coast of Hawke's Bay and why that's going to be even more important than before. Fourthly, restoring law and order. And I know that this is an issue in this electorate. You will, in this area, you will see the ram runs, you will see the crime out of control. So restoring law and order is important. And fifthly and finally, better health and education services. One of the things about this government is they're good at shoving money out the door, but they're not good at holding the system to account for that money. Take education, for example. $5 billion more added to education spending, 1,400 more bureaucrats in the Ministry of Education. We can't get our kids to go to school, and our education results are plummeting. Health is another example. Billions plowed into health, and you will know about mental health. Remember that $1.9 billion? The money has been vaporised. The money has gone nowhere. Mental health is worse than it was 5 years ago, as our emergency party waiting times. So a focus on results rather than necessarily just massive increases in spending is what National will focus on. Thank you.
Okay. Recently, as National has had a succession of issues with candidates. It's impossible to keep up with all of the various badly behaved young men that the party has put in plum seats. Why should voters put their trust in your party's values?
Well, I would just ask you to look at who we're running in this campaign. We are running a standing set of candidates in this election. And we're running a fantastic candidate. Yeah, I mean, if we want to get down the journey by talking about banning kids, Michael, where do you want me to start on the useless backbench that you have sitting behind you? I'd rather just ask the audience to justify who we put forward at this election. Look, we've had bad elections in the past. By the way, so has the Labour Party. By the way, so has the Green Party. Political parties are not perfect entities. They put their best foot forward.
Chris Bishop! Don't you think that, with regards to Maureen Pugh, if anyone was going to believe in extreme weather events and the frequency of them, it would be someone who's been struck by lightning 3 times. Unbelievable! The way we're organising this is we invite all the parties that either poll above 1% or achieve above 1% in the 2020 general election party vote or won a seat. So it's Party Māori and New Zealand First. We did invite, we tried to get them along, it wouldn't work out. And the way that we're going to order things tonight is that we'll go in order of party vote for 2020, which means our next candidate is the MP for Auckland Central, the Greens, Swarbrick.
My name is Swarbrick. I've had the privilege of serving as a Green MP for the past 5 years and serving my community here at Auckland Central for the past 2 or so years. And I'm really hoping that I get to do it again beginning of this election. So I'm going to keep this because I know that we're going to go into detail on questions at high level that Jack asked us for. It's really interesting in the Greens because, you know, our name is green and our colour is green, and obviously we care about the environment, but we care about a whole lot of things. So just to unpack that for all of you, because when I've talked about this in the past, people have said, that's interesting, didn't quite know that. The Green Party of Aotearoa New Zealand has the same 4 core charter principles as Green parties across the world. The thing that differentiates us here in Aotearoa is a commitment to Te Tiriti Waimani, the indigenous version of the text, recognised by progressive bastions like the United Nations as the legitimate version of the text, where we're talking about a contract that was signed by a colonial force and indigenous peoples. That filters through all of those values. So the first is ecological wisdom. All these names will come up with them Julian and Harry's time back in the 1980s, so bear with me. Ecological wisdom is recognition of the fact that resources are finite. Even those resources that do regenerate need time and space, and God forbid some planning in order to regenerate. If you accept that as the first premise, the second one makes a whole lot of sense. Social responsibility, or social justice is non-derogatory oriented. That is, if we recognise that those resources are somewhat finite, we ensure that everybody has access to, at the very least, the base level of those resources to participate in this thing that we call society. If we don't do that, then we end up with what we have at the moment, which is the highest levels of inequality that we have seen in this country since records began. And in the most egregious kind of examples of that, social decline and degradation. The third principle is appropriate decision making. It's about devolving decision making powers down to the level where it actually affects people, so massiveness for local government. The fourth is non-violence. Obviously we're hippies, we're not going to war. But I think if you look into it a little bit deeper, it's about how do we create systems and structures and ways of governing that aren't potentially quite inherently violent or neglecting of communities, that further down the track, when those systems are being implemented, make decisions say, hey, this totally forgot about my life, my experience, and doesn't reflect it. So it's about building those systems in the first place that reflect all 4 of those core charter principles. And I'm going to take a question, Jack.
Okay. In an MMP environment, where the Greens' influence on Labour has been debatable, should the Greens sit on the crossbenches?
Good question, and I'll be totally honest and say that this is a discussion that we have regularly and frequently inside of our caucus.
What's your position?
My position depends on the day and on the context. What I'd say is that you need 61 votes of the 120 in our parliament to pass any law, to pass any budget. In this term of parliament, Labour holds 65. The transformation that we were promised has not been delivered. And the Greens, with our 10 votes in this term of parliament, have, I think, all of us can see reflected in sexual and domestic violence policy and climate change policy and otherwise. We have exerted disproportionate power and influence, but we haven't been holding the wheel. So what we're asking for, and what we'll continue campaigning for, is for that stronger mandate and that continual ability to push Labour further and faster to get what is absolutely necessary done. Thank you.
That we're all born unique and that we should all have the freedom and right to choose how we live our lives and what we do with our bodies. Equal obligation to respect the way that others choose to live their lives. and also has a vision for New Zealand, which is a property-owning democracy, where if you study hard, work hard and save hard, you should aspire to actually become wealthier than your parents' generation were. That's the New Zealand that we used to have, and we can have that again. Now, ACT exists as a public policy organisation where we actually believe that by applying the right principles, we can develop practical solutions for New Zealand. And I'll give you an example. Based over the past 12 months, we researched how to build New Zealand and conserve nature using a combination of free market principles and smaller government. A few weeks ago, we saw some terrible floods in Auckland where those public institutions charged with actually delivering stormwater infrastructure network that protect lives and properties clearly failed. But when we look at other jurisdictions, similar to New Zealand, which have solved this problem, they rely on private sector institutional capital like our own ACC, our own super fund, which does invest in infrastructure projects right now, to build their way out of the infrastructure deficit. But where governments do clearly have a role, and that's in public safety. I spoke today to a student who said in her first few weeks in our broadcast, there have been 3 public disorder incidents outside the front door where multiple police had to attend to intervene with people who she thought were really dangerous, scary people. The government does have a role, and that's when people in communities ask for more police to keep them safe, whether it's in the Auckland CBD or down at Tairāwhiti in the Hawke's Bay. The government should respond and accept the word of the victim in that case. Now, in 2023, Anthony asking people for their votes. If you want real change, not just changing the blue captain for the red captain, if you want to put ACT at the centre of the centre-right government, we'll be asking you to vote ACT in 2023.
On the interpretation of fertility or Waitangi. He says it's a bottom line, and I know that politicians always say that, but what would be the impact on race relations in New Zealand if a non-Māori majority were to vote and overrule the Māori interpretation and the Māori text of the treaty? What would be the end result?
Well, actually, we don't think that would be the result. ACT thinks that the Te Reo Māori version of the treaty contains some real gems that Kiwis can get behind.
And if it was undermined,
I'm not quite as fluent to our Māori as David Seymour. I'm going to give you a stat. Article 2 guarantees ngā tikanga katoa ritatahi, the same rights and duties. That's translated from Te Reo Māori into English. So if we were to have a referendum on should Article 2 of the treaty actually be the way we go forward with race relations in New Zealand, that we have the same rights and duties, we think get behind that, and it would actually unite New Zealanders rather than being subject to divisions that has been for so many years in the past.
Does Rangatira mean something?
Well, Rangatira, as far as I understand, means chieftainship, and what ACT has that to mean is actually property rights of your own land. We're not in solutions. What's been really compelling is that groups representing Brunei people and countries have made the same claim for why their property rights should be protected from government as business and developers. And I actually think there's an opportunity to unite with that.
Simon Paul! Politics is sort of tribal. Are there people here who haven't actually decided who they're going to vote for in the selection? Okay, that's great. That's great. I think one of the most admirable qualities in a person is if they are genuinely open to new ideas, as I'm sure you will agree. So it's good to have a bit of robust back and forth, but also to hear the candidates' ideas. Please welcome from the Oppourtunities Party, Top Manji!
developing policy that works, policy that can actually be delivered, and policy that gives us the outcomes that we want. And what are those outcomes? For us, it's about a fairer New Zealand. We want a New Zealand where there are opportunities for all, where every kid can go to school with a full start, where they live in a safe place, where they can learn stuff and go out into the world and find their own path, their own journey. That's absolutely critical. And what we have at the moment is a system which doesn't deliver that. The status quo has failed. National Labour, National Labour, National Labour. See the pattern? We need and that's not to say that everyone's like this, or we people that do. But what we need is a shift away from the partisan and tribal politics that have driven us towards the outcome we have now, which is a society fixated on property prices, a society fixated on extracting rents, a society that is not focused on productivity, on creativity, on innovation, on science, and where too many people are left behind. We need to change that. We believe we can. We believe we can play a positive part of that. That's what the Oppourtunities Party is about. Please join us and make that a reality in the coming election. Thank you very much.
My Twitter correct is top is super popular on university campuses, super popular on Twitter, but not to want to draw your pattern analogy too much. 2017, 2020, the only seat at the top is one, so far as I'm aware, is a seat on the Houghton Community Board. So, totem of Democratic might. So why is this election different?
Good question. Look, you've got to start somewhere, and you start in Featherstone. After that, look, you're right, this is version 3.0. The MFP system we have has got a huge barrier to entry. Now, New Zealand loves cartels. More like banks, more like energy companies, tool-free supermarkets, and all extracting huge profits. So we like cartels. Parliament's a cartel. So the MFP, the threshold at 5% is designed to keep new parties out. That means so we want the threshold to come down. We want a dynamic, representative body. We want new ideas. We want people coming into Parliament. And maybe Parliament, too many people in Parliament, there's way too long. We need a big turnover to look at. I think this is a different time. The challenges that we face as a nation, the challenges that we see around the world, need some new thinking, need some fresh thinking, need some fresh faces. I'm going to win Ireland. For those of you that don't know, I'm a city councillor there. We went through a lot in the last decade, lots of disasters, the earthquakes, flooding, fires, the terror attack. I have a lot of sympathy for people in Auckland and what they're going through, and people on the East Coast being affected by the floods. It's terrible. It's really challenging. But look, I think we can play a positive part. I think we can work collaboratively, and I think we can generate better outcomes for New Zealand. So that's what it's about. But ultimately, it's going to be up to the people to decide.
Very good, Manji. From the New Conservative, please welcome Helen Houghton.
Hello everyone. I feel like I shouldn't actually be on that side with you because I'm not sure which side is actually more challenging. And I say that because come exam time, I'm sure that most of you choose this side. The reason why I mentioned that first up is because I want to acknowledge that your circumstances, I see them. Okay, it is not easy to be a student. It's not a walk in the park being a student. So some of you may know I am on the campus in Canterbury. And I also know that it's not always easy, the journey just to get to university for some people. Okay? So while you are all here, I just really campus buildings up. Anyway, we have a vision you can see for New Zealand, and that vision is a bit of a dream. So there was a great man, a great young man, exactly 60 years ago, he had a dream. He actually demonstrated for freedom and democracy, and funny enough, he's still doing that now. Something here might have been demonstrating for freedom and democracy, he's still doing that. So our dream, I'll just tell you what our dream was for New Zealand. Our dream is for a community that their families thrive and flourish. Okay? Our dream is for individual responsibility and hard work where it is encouraged and rewarded. Our dream is for a New Zealand where there is no medical collusion, where human rights that I needed to work out what my priorities were, and that I probably wasn't going to make it. This is all while I was juggling at that time my young preschool children to get to university on time, all because I wanted a better life for my sons. And so while I wanted a better life for my sons, you Conservative want to make sure that New Zealand is the best it can be for all of you.
Okay, let's go on. My question for Helen is, how many stars did you give your Uber driver? No. My question for you is, this is a community and environment who perhaps have diametrically opposed views when it comes to your social policies. I think it's fair to say. I think it makes for Solomon. If you can't recognise that, that's bad. Yeah. My question to you though is actually the same as Raf's. You've had 4 elections, you haven't got close to getting in on any of them. Why is this election different? Is that common? Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if I can talk that up as a big country. Why will this be different? Why will it be different? Why will you give in this time? As you are well aware, New Zealand is in a high inflationary environment, 7.2%, according to the last CPI, if I read it right. Tight labour market, skyrocketing borrowing costs, problems getting staff everywhere, some chokes in immigration, which I'm sure the minister would love to speak to. So, first subject this evening is the New Zealand economy. And can you each give me the economic policies that your party would prioritise for a more prosperous and sustainable New Zealand? And we'll start with Michael.
I just want to start by talking about something that Martin Luther King actually stood for. And on the day that he died 40 years ago, he was in Memphis, Tennessee, addressing a group of striking janitors, standing with the lowest paid workers in our society and arguing for their inclusion in the economic system. That's what he actually stood for throughout his whole life. And that is the Labour Party's vision for an economy that works for everyone. Because an economy is not just a bunch of numbers on a spreadsheet. An economy is not just GDP growth, bearing in mind that the disasters we've just experienced will probably help the economy to grow by the end of the year. The economy ultimately is about people, and it's about how people can make their way and reach their potential in their lives. And so that's why our focus is relentlessly on building a more productive, low-carbon economy. Actually taking advantage of our transition to a low zero carbon country by trying to create green jobs. By making sure that people who go and work hard, those people who got us through COVID, the supermarket checkout operators, the people who worked on the buses and our cleaners, actually get fair pay for the work that they do and aren't left behind even as the rest of the economy grows for everyone. It's about having a fair tax system in which we don't just cut taxes to those at the top, but make sure that we have the public services that give everyone else in our society opportunity. It's about recognising that government has a role in growing a highly productive economy, not to the total exclusion of the private sector, but working together. So that's why we've done things like investing in the research and development tax credit, to actually try and give our economy that boost and make sure that we're investing in the things that will create high quality jobs. That's why we've invested in the apprenticeship system, so that we actually help young people get into the trades, learn new skills, and actually have a more productive economy in which people can contribute their skills. And we're not always in the situation where we are having to rely on the international labour market to fill the skills gaps that we haven't filled ourselves. So if the Labour government you do get, and you will get, a government that is focused on supporting people into jobs, growing our economy in a genuinely productive way, moving towards a low carbon economy, and then making sure that we share the fruits of that growth in a way that's fair and equitable. Because ultimately that is what an economy is for. It's about people. People aren't about the economy. Thanks.
Professor, please.
It is deaf. Michael's right that the economy is fundamentally about people. It's the reason we exist, right? But what is happening at the moment is inflation is at a 30-year high. Now, I've said before that none of you have ever seen it at that level. I haven't ever seen it at that level. I'm 39, so you don't remember. Inflation is the thief in your back pocket. It erodes the money that you earn and the money that you have, time after time. And once it gets into an artery of an economy, it is bloody hard to get out. And you won't remember that we went through that period in the 1970s, in which inflation got into the arteries of the New Zealand economy, and it produced imbalances and tough times that actually the fourth Labour government had to deal with from 1984 onwards. So the number one issue that people say to me, and I talk to them all over the country, the number one issue people say to me is, what are you going to do about the cost of living? A few ideas. The first is, we do need to restore discipline to government spending. So the government will say, inflation was caused by Ukraine, by the oil price, and that's partly true. There's no doubt about that. Some of that inflation that is coming to New Zealand is important. But the government is making it worse through turning on the fiscal fire hose and spending and spending and spending. Government spending is up 50% in the last 5 years. Every budget, Grant Robertson turns up and says, here's my new bit of money that I'm going to spend. And every year, he blows the budget. Every year. Done it for 5 years in a row, and my prediction is he'll do it this time around as well. All of that has an impact. It's all cumulative. So government spending is having an impact on inflation. We need to get that under control. We need to stop spending things like $65 million on light rail consultants, $50 million on the cycle bridge across the harbour that Michael was in charge of that they cancelled. The TPNZ-RNZ merger that was off, and now it's finally off apparently, but meanwhile it will cost you $50 million or some outrageous sum of money while we went through all the consultancies. We now spend $1.4 billion a year as a country on consultants in Wellington. Chris Houghton, our new Prime Minister, came to power in 2018 saying, I'm going to keep this under control. And the amount they spend has doubled. So there is fat in the system and we need to get that under control. Second thing is we need to unlock the bottlenecks in the economy. And frankly, we do need to allow more skilled migration in. We do. You go up and down the streets of Queen Street, you go down Northern Street, you go to any main street in streets in New Zealand and you talk to the small business owners, they can't get skilled workers. The restaurants can't get chefs, can't get cooks. Our health system, we can't get nurses, we can't get enough doctors. Paying them more is part of it, no doubt about it. But I tell you what, letting people into the country in the first place would be a good idea as well. We do need to reduce costs on business. I've spoken for too long. One cost that we can get rid of is the removal of interest deductibility on landlords. That has put pressure on rents. You are all paying more in rent as a result of that policy that Labor introduced. We need to refocus the Reserve Bank on price stability, technical point, but an important point, and we need to reduce bottlenecks in the economy. National has a plan to tackle the cost of living, and under us.
What's the plan?
Are tax cuts inflationary?
No, not if you have offsetting spending reductions to pay for.
A question for the Minister as well. Since the first brought up immigration, I think I've asked you already, but it'd be good to do it in this environment. When it comes to questioning the government about why, in the face of a climate crisis that it tells us about, we are extending the excise tax cut once again, they say, oh, well, the cost of living pressures are immediate, we've got to focus on the cost of living pressures. But when you say, oh, why don't we open up some of the immigration requirements, the answer is, oh, well, we need to build a more sustainable economy and build jobs within New Zealand. Why don't those two answers apply for the same question? Why, if the cost of living crisis is our number one priority, which is what the Prime Minister says, why aren't we relaxing some of our immigration policy?
It's a good and a fair question, and I'll address it in a couple of ways. The first is by talking about what the government's trying to achieve with our immigration policy, and that is to try and strike the balance right so that New Zealand does get access to the skills that we need from people around the world. Our country's been built on the contributions and the talents of people who have migrated here for many, many years, since New Zealand's country, in fact, and that will always be the case. But there is no doubt that over the last 20 years or so, we have become particularly reliant on very large numbers of people who we've employed in the very lowest wage, low-skilled jobs, and kind of used and abused. And so the purpose of our government's immigration policy is to get that balance right, to make sure that we're supporting people to settle well into New Zealand, to make sure that they're respected when they work here and not exploited, because our record in that area has been shameful. But at the same time, to match that up with making sure that we are investing in the skills and the training and the apprenticeships that frankly we let go in this country 30 or 40 years ago. So it's not one of those issues as it often gets positioned in political debate as being over here or over there, in our view. It's about trying to strike a balance. And in terms of loosening up immigration settings, the work we've done on immigration over the last year, I'll give you one stat which I guess belies the accusation that somehow our government is not supporting people to settle well into New Zealand. That the average number of people who have been made residents of New Zealand over about the last 10 years has been about 30,000 people per year. Last year, under our Resident Visa 21 policy, it was 140,000 people, about 4 times the average. We've increased the number of people who come to work in New Zealand on a working visa. Increased the number of people who can work here under the RBC scheme. We've started to get the system open again, including putting all clinical and allied roles in health onto the green list at the university. So we're trying to get that balance right. It's a tricky issue, we need to keep working it through, but that's our position.
Good, thank you.
I say very briefly on immigration that if we want to go some way to also restoring that balance with regard to the rights of migrants, particularly migrants who are bringing over here to do the work, we need to decouple those visas from their employers so that they have the ability to actually on this kind of topic of the economy. What are we talking about when we're talking about the economy? Michael's kind of given you, I think, we've got some shared views there. What we're talking about is all of us and the stuff that we create. Okay? And we're talking about GDP, and there has been a myopic focus on GDP from successive governments. What we're talking about is effectively a metric that will go up when we have natural disasters, when somebody gets cancer, when somebody gets in a car crash, because there has to be economic transactions in order to undo that social ill. And that is the fundamental problem with the way that we conceive of our economy at the moment. We do not consider that as something that should be in service of people on the planet, but instead as an almost deity that we have to sacrifice to when it is angry. And I think this was pretty well conceptualised, actually, also by a former backbencher from the Labour Party, the candidate for Mount Houghton, and then our Prime Minister, who once said that our economy is a housing market with a few bits tacked on the side. Unfortunately, we still very much have that system. Bernard took it on, but he did often reference that it did originate from Jacinda Ardern and Nancy Hansard. The point that I make here is that so much of our economy is currently premised on housing. And I'd also like to address that point as made by Chris Bishop, that rents are somehow getting more expensive by virtue of the fact that those tax deductibility changes came into effect. Most economists will agree that rents in this country are not dictated by pass-through costs. They are the maximum of what the market will bear. And we'll get to housing later. I also just wanted to speak to education briefly, because I think that it's another really key component of this discussion about the economy and about productivity. So, during the 2020 COVID budget, when the government was gearing up to spend 10 times the projected operating allowance that it had initially thought that it would be spending prior to COVID landing on our shores, I had what was one of the most frustrating discussions inside our Green Party parliamentary team when we heard that then the Minister of Education, obviously now our Prime Minister, was making the call in that tens of billions of dollars more put on the books to spend. Labour decided that they would be cutting reinstatement of postgraduate student allowances and the second year of fees-free tertiary education. Those two things are critical for ensuring that we are investing in the education that is necessary for us to have the productivity that all of us will be banging on about. And that's why when you look at the jurisdictions overseas that are doing well on this productivity stuff, but also doing really well in terms of civic participation, it is that investment in education. And that's why the Greens stand for a guaranteed minimum income, which in practice is a universal student allowance. Pay for it with a tax on wealth.
Do you have enough money to pay the bills? Do you have a bit left over to save for something important? Do you feel like you need it? And in the past 5 or so years, while we've had a few blips coming out of COVID, everyone had a bit more money to spend on stuff. Actually, today, most Kiwis will tell you they're doing it tough. They don't feel like they're getting it. I just want to give you some examples about how the government's well-meaning policy has actually affected the cost of living and made it hard for Kiwis to get here. Now, in a kind and caring society, we would all want renters to live in healthy rental homes. And we would want landlords to have give them some flexibility at the end of their tenancy. Like, can you stay on a little bit longer? Are your kids going to local school? They're really great initiatives. But what some of the rules around landlords and owning a rental property has been, and I saw an analysis yesterday, that has added about $150 a week to the average rental in the metros around New Zealand. Now, nobody is paying accommodation supplement or giving students an extra $150 a week. In fact, the Labour government gave them $50 and patted itself on the back. Every single intervention, whether it's in the housing market or with rentals, that adds cost to people who supply you with stuff, adds to the cost of living, makes you feel poorer. So what would that do? Well, firstly, we'd get rid of crazy schemes like the clean car discount, that taxes used to subsidise Teslas to the tune of about $8,000. I talked to people who bought 40,000 cars a year into New Zealand, and they said it's costing the average Kiwi $3,000 to $5,000 to replace a used car, more than it would have 2 years ago. All of that cost is going on to your household bills when you go and buy stuff from the supermarket. And we say, get rid of those crazy policies. They don't actually reduce our emissions at all. They don't make it easier for renters to get into affordable homes. But what we would do, we'd say that back in 2017 there was about 47,000 people working in the core public service in Wellington. There's now 61,000. We could probably get back to 2017 levels and still enjoy the same level of service. In fact, we might even have more money. What the actual alternative budget says we would have more money to spend on education and healthcare. So here's just a snapshot. We've released two fully costed alternative budgets in 2021 and 2022. We'll be doing another one this year. We will show how to free up more of your money to spend on the things that you want and to direct government to spend money on services that actually benefit communities.
We talk a lot and we hear a lot about productivity. We've had the productivity commission in New Zealand probably for 10 years. We have to invest in the basics that underpin the economy. So that is things like infrastructure. So how do we get around? How do we move goods around? Obviously roads, rail. That's really critical. We've done some of that. A good example is the UFB, the ultra-fast broadband rollout. Thank you, Chris. Yes, that was very good advice. We had a JV with the previous government. Really critical because it provides the digital infrastructure that we need to build the businesses on top of that in science, in tech, in innovation. But we're not very good at it, that's the problem. One of the biggest things holding us back in the productivity space is our focus on housing. So much of our new money, new credit goes into housing. So much of our wealth is held in housing. So one of the key policies, and we're the only party with this policy, that we're proposing for the next election is what we call a tax. And essentially what we're doing is shifting the burden of tax from incomes, because we want high incomes. That is what is going to solve the cost of living crisis. And we're going to shift the burden onto land, because land, that is where the wealth sits. The land market in New Zealand went from about $500 billion to $1.5 trillion in 10 years. That's where the money is, and that's why people invest in property. But if you're young, you're not talented, you're never going to be able to afford that. But it's also a waste of our resources. That is the key thing. So land value tax is real valuable money to take out the heat of our wealth appreciation and use it to provide income tax cuts, including a $15,000 tax-free threshold. Now, Australia can do this. Why can't we? They've got better productivity than us. But our settings are wrong, and that's absolutely critical. I want to talk a little bit also about immigration. I think this government, unfortunately, has been anti-immigration, anti-migrant, blaming immigrants for house prices going up, which is not true, treating migrants really poorly through COVID, making immigration into New Zealand very difficult. We need fresh energy, we need fresh people, it's really important, it drives the economy, and we can't provide all the labour we need. And what we're seeing at the moment, with labour costs going up, is because actually we have a shortage of labour, and it's absolutely critical that our borders are opened. We're not getting the investment that we need, we need more inward investment. If we're going to drive a thriving economy, we need to be part of the global market, we need to have investment coming in, we want tech companies investing here, and we want that exchange of IP, of knowledge capital, and we want people to know that New Zealand is a place where you can come and start a business and trade with the rest of the world. So that's absolutely critical. So we have to change our tax settings. That is probably the most important policy in this election. It's getting to grips with this ridiculous land appreciation to where all our wealth is held in New Zealand.
Okay, we think New Zealand is over-governed, over-regulated, over-taxed and unfunded matters. So I just want to tell you what the difference is between the Conservative and other parties. Not only are we socially fiscal, but we're also socially conservative, but also fiscally conservative. Because if we have a strong economics, we have strong social policy and vice versa. Right? Now when we look at taxes, there's a sweet spot in taxes. If we set the taxes too low, and we don't have enough revenue to pay for our welfare state. If we have the taxes too high, then we depress economic activity, and then we also have a issue with the revenue. So with those things in mind, we actually believe that the taxes are too high currently. We think that the high tax is too high. We actually think that the middle band, actually all of them need to go up for inflation. Otherwise, it's just regressive tax. So the lower band needs to be set at zero. Zero that way all of the low-income earners are not affected as much. So it's really important too that we're looking at GST, dropping that down from 15% to 12.5 so we can stimulate the activity, stimulate economics. Now it's really also, corporate tax we think is too high and needs to be dropped a little bit. We're talking about you guys, after you leave here, going to get work. Now a lot of you might think that you're going to the government, but as you can see, with COVID, with even the earthquakes down in Christchurch and down in climate, so the real cyclone here, government is not going to be able to employ you. So you're going to need to be working in places where there's other corporates are going to employ you. So we need to actually be looking after them so that they will be able to employ you. Income tax, yeah. So
thank you, Helen. Great. Okay. My last day, I really want to save some time for questions at the end, so let's just get all the candidates here, let's just get this nice and fast. I think we've got two more subjects we'd really like to get through. Climate change and the environment and housing. We've all touched, or some of us have touched a little bit on housing, but I think given the events of the last couple of months, maybe having a bit more of a weight on climate change and the environment is a good idea. So I'll open this up. Talk us through the party's plans for mitigation and adaptation. Chloe Swarbrick.
So initially we're going to try and keep this really tight so that we can then get questions from the floor. Long story short, climate mitigation is about how do we reduce our emissions. Climate adaptation is about how do we adapt to an already changed environment or planet. We have to do both of those things. What you'll possibly hear from some of the other speakers is that Aotearoa New Zealand emits less than 1% of global emissions. But if you add up all of the countries that do that, you're talking about a quarter of global emissions. We cannot ask the other guys to do what we are not doing ourselves. And also, being a developed economy, we are in a position to showcase to other countries and also potentially to even export intellectual property to contribute towards climate adaptation and mitigation. I also think it's really important to note that adaptation done well is also mitigation. What I mean by that is that here in Oppourtunities, we have one of the largest cities in the world land mass-wise. And what we seem to have been intent on doing for the past few decades is sprawling out as far as possible onto all of our productive land that is necessary for localised food production in, for example, a climate change world. So we need to stop doing that. We also need to stop sprawling out in such a way that fosters what's called carbon dependency. That is incredibly expensive, but also forces people to be in a situation where they don't have access to, for example, rapid transit networks, walking and cycling 15-minute cities is zero. So we can do both housing intensity done well, and we can also make sure that we're reducing emissions. Singapore has done it, and they're a really good example of where it's been done in the form of a sponge city, and obviously multiple apartments. So, long story short, adaptation and mitigation, we can do both of those things. Thank you.
I'll be quick on this. I mean, unfortunately, mitigation is one of the worst words that anyone ever invents. Nobody understands. But we have to do both. We've got to reduce our emissions, and we've got to adapt to this changing world. And what we've seen in the last couple of months has just been a reminder that we have to be careful where we build. We have to take seriously coastal retreat, or managed retreat as it's known, and we can't mess about with that anymore. I mean, we went through this in Christchurch after the earthquakes. We had huge swathes of land which essentially were red zoned, and people were told you cannot build here again. Why? Because the ground was not good to build on, and we're going to have to make some of those decisions. The important thing is to have those conversations with the communities involved, but we have to take action. One thing we can do as a country is sign a treaty which essentially puts a cap on fossil fuel production. So let's keep the fossil fuels in the ground. It's called the Fossil Fuel Treaty. The Greens are supportive of that. We're very supportive of that. I think New Zealand should push that. It's quite important. Because otherwise the big producers are just going to keep digging stuff out of the ground, and that's a problem. What else can we do? We need to rewire New Zealand. So essentially, to decarbonise, we also have to invest hugely in renewable technology and electrifying as much as we can. We import over $10 billion a year of fossil fuel products to use. So the more that we can make it domestically, the better off we will be in terms of our trade balance. And essentially what we're doing is we're importing a lot of this stuff so that we can chop down trees, basically, make milk and send it overseas. It's a pretty silly cycle. We should be investing in high-tech stuff. That's really the key. So if we want to decarbonise our economy and move to a more weightless economy, science, tech, and innovation is going to drive it. But there is no time to develop this. Everyone has to be in agreement around this, and hopefully we'll all do it as well.
I agree with Chloe about the fact that we need to reduce and we need to adapt. She makes good points. Actually, I think everyone will say we agree with that. We do need to reduce our emissions. We do need to adapt to what's coming from the rest of the world and what the climate is doing to us. 2 quick points. The first is, one of the best things we can do to reduce emissions is do density well in our cities. Build more housing in the inner cities, in Wellington, Auckland and Christchurch. There's a lot of economic evidence out there on this to suggest that doing so is the single most effective way of reducing carbon emissions. So we do need to build more housing in our inner cities. We do need to have good tree protection and sponge cities.
You took out tree protection.
Well, I disagree with your characterisation of that.
What did you do? What was your characterisation?
I was looking at what happened in 2012, when I wasn't even there, and things moved on. Second point is this. In comparison to almost any other country, New Zealand is uniquely placed to take advantage of the clean energy revolution that is coming. We have thousands upon thousands of megawatts of wind energy out there in our landscape. We have hundreds, probably thousands, of megawatts of geothermal energy, and we still have more hydro resources that we can explore as well, that we can develop and use in an environmentally responsible way. We should be going all out to massively increase renewable energy production in New Zealand. The opportunities are enormous for cheap, reliable, renewable energy that can electrify New Zealand and can hear national talking all about it.
In 2023, is it morally defensible for New Zealand's biggest emitting sector, the agriculture sector, to be exempt from paying anything under the ETS?
Well, both National and Labour support moving agriculture to a system where they face a price signal. The question is, how do you do that?
It's still waiting though, eh? It's waiting a long time.
It's really technical really quickly.
Well, not really. I don't think it's easy.
Yes and no, but both National and Labour support that. And it is important that agriculture pays its way.
Should it be paying now? Should it be paying now?
Well, they're going through a process. The industry has come up with a proposal. It's called a pocket economic. That has a lot of very sensible suggestions in there. The government position on that is a little bit might have some governments and we might get more, but the government position on that is a little bit unclear. We think what they come up with is a good start.
What did they come up with?
They came up with a way where they do face pricing for emissions, and they are measured in farmers and the agriculture sector to do offsets on their farm to improve, offset their emissions and reduce over time.
2025.
A tree for every cow.
If there's was any doubt at all before the last few weeks, climate change is up. You can't hear you. If there's
No, because these can be finished.
If there was any doubt before the anniversary weekend floods, climate change is a current reality, it's not a future threat. In my community of Mount Roskill, we have a stream called Te Aohanga, or Yoki Creek. It goes right through my electorate. And it just so happens that, generally speaking, that the poorest people in my community in state housing live along that creek. And they're the people who lost everything in the floods. Water 1.5 metres high going through their houses. And so for anyone out there, the Matthew Houghtons of the world, who say, who say that it's too late, we shouldn't do anything, give up, just adapt. I challenge those people to go and actually talk to the people at ground level who have been suffering over the last few weeks because of this. There's a profound moral and political duty on all of us, not just in Parliament, but all of us, to do everything that we reasonably can to reduce emissions. What's our government's approach? It's to kind of be guided, I guess, by that sense of mission, our hearts, but to use our heads as well. And so the approach that we've taken there has been to look to countries around the world who have done this well. Because this is a really important thing. This situation is scary, right? But actually you should feel hopeful, because there are countries out there who over the last 10 or 15 years have used their heads, have developed plans and implemented policies, and are reducing their emissions at the same time as they're holding up living standards and growing. And that's the model we need to follow. So we've got an emissions reduction plan in place. That's our plan that we based off advice from the Independent Climate Commission, something that the Greens and Labour worked on in government, so that our plans and our policies in climate are actually not just based on political debate, but based on the best advice from people who know the science in this area. And across every area we're now rolling out changes. So my area of transport, the clean car discount that Simon the ACT Party National proposes, that has made New Zealand the second best market in the world for zero emissions vehicles after Scandinavia. The additional investment, if you look at a nice look in the Sound Leaf with the clean car discount, about $8,000 you'll be able to pick that up. Now, all of the additional investment that we put into public transport and the rail system after it was run down by the Green Minister. The policies we're putting in place to make it easier for kids to safely walk or cycle for school that turns Simeon Brown incandescent with rage. So that's the way that we're approaching this issue, is to look systematically at the changes we can make across transport, every part of the system, stopping offshore drilling of oil and gas, making those steps on agriculture. We have a plan in place. We need to keep moving and accelerating it, and we cannot listen to those people who will pull us back. And this is one of the biggest issues that's at stake this election, because every single one of those policies I've just outlined, every single one has been opposed by the other side of politics, the national act. So make sure you think climate will make this year.
Okay, just very quickly, Minister. You know, we all think back, and I know the media always brings this up. Climate change is the nuclear-free issue of my generation. And when critics look at your government's history on climate change, they would know that the agriculture sector still isn't paying anything for its emissions under the ETS. They would look at things like the repeated extension of the petrol excise fuel tax cut. They would note that our emissions, if not for COVID-19, may not have actually dropped under the time you've been in Parliament. They've been more or less steady over the last 5 years. Even the ban for offshore oil and gas arguably led to New Zealand importing more Indonesian coal. Do you think, looking back over the last 5 years, your government has honestly lived up to the urgency of that message?
As I said in my comments before, the way that we have tried to approach this issue is to take a all-of-government approach to say that we need to systematise action on climate through every single area of activity that we are involved in. So the one I can speak to most directly is transport here. It is a big ship to turn around. So the challenge in transport is that since 1990, our emissions have increased by 90%, as we have remorselessly relied more and more predominantly on the private vehicle fleet and increased the number of cars in the fleet. And entire communities, business models and lifestyles, we've built our lives around doing that and driving everywhere. As Chris said before, he's right about this, our urban forms in our biggest cities haven't given people those choices because we're small and made people hard to get more. It is one of those classic issues where it requires sustained action over a whole range of policies if you want to make a meaningful difference. You can't do that around in 1 year. But I've identified pretty specifically in that area all the stuff that we are doing. And what our modelling now shows in most of those areas, including industrial production, transport and other key areas, with those policies that we've put in place, and there will be more of the budget this year, this will be one of our top priorities. We're on track to start reducing our emissions in the first 5-year carbon budget that the Climate Commission set up. So the work's there, there's more to do, and we need to accelerate.
Okay, thank you, Minister. Simon Paul.
So New Zealand has to play its part in climate change effort to reduce our emissions. Next policy is quite simple. Tie our actual emissions reduction targets to that of the actual emissions achieved by the top 5 trading partners. That will put New Zealand businesses and consumers on level playing field. But I want to just contrast that really simple practical policy with what we're doing. So the Minister said that we're going to use, like all the tools across government. I think Prime Minister James Shaw, Prime Minister for 5 years, he has produced a climate adaptation plan here. So we're going to pull all the levers of government. Well, I'm doing a digger. If you pull all the levers, the machine just spins round and round and round. And that's exactly what the Greens and Labour have done with climate policy. I also want to contrast some of Mac's ideas. The government's proposing to spend $2 billion buying carbon credits offshore in order to meet the insane targets announced by James Shaw at various climate conferences he chairs it off to. Now, when we think about how much water wins through, and look, to be honest, Mac voted against the zero carbon act because we said it might work, it's not practical.
You weren't in Parliament.
$2 billion to buy climate credits, carbon credits overseas. Imagine how far that money would go to actually reshape stockpiles to create the kind of stormwater soakage that I saw in New Orleans last year, where after Hurricane Katrina, instead of red zoning entire parts of the city, they said, hey, we've got these fantastic public parks. Maybe if we dig out 100,000 or 200,000 cubic metres, we can put the trees back, and then that's temporary storage for when the flood comes. New Zealand needs to adapt to climate change, but what we don't need to do is impoverish ourselves with crazy policies advanced by the Greens and Labour.
Okay, so I actually agree with some of what the ACT representative has said. Attributing every climate weather event, every weather event to climate change is actually unsound and just lays
I'll give you a chance to finish. But just to be clear on your position here, do you think that human beings have contributed to climate change?
I think this is a bigger conversation to have.
Yes, okay. Well, we'll invite each of the candidates to come up and speak at the next meeting. Okay, great. I'm pretty ambivalent about who we got to play. So, Red here, Jonah. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. Oh, you've heard the question as well. I love it.
So earlier this month, 19 workers at Company Girls Wellington. 19 workers at Company Girls Wellington were fired en masse for standing up for their labour rights. What will your respective parties do to ensure meaningful reforms for independent contractors and workers as a whole, especially in the light of the recent landmark overtime case?
I think the minister's probably here for much more response, so it's okay.
This is an issue that we've been concerned about for a while. If people haven't followed it so closely, just kind of we're excited because it's about the strippers. The issue is about whether people are classified as employees or contractors, and if people get misclassified as contractors, they don't have the same set of rights that people who are employees have. And there are definitely issues across our labour market where that's happening. So what have we done? We've set up a process where we've got both the Council of Trade Unions and Business New Zealand to get in a room with government to actually look at the current laws that we've got in place and make some recommendations so that we have a much clearer dividing line so that people who are genuinely workers get classified in that right and get all of those core rights, whether it's sick leave, holiday leave, security of your employment, all those other important things. We've got their recommendations in front of us now, and we're looking at what we might need to change in terms of the law in order to make sure that people do have those really important rights, and that's a part of our core work, whether it's fair pay agreements, minimum wage, to make sure that workers are treated with respect and dignity. That's core to who we are.
More questions? Okay, one little here, Kilda.
I'll just ask like this. National, Labour and Greens all said tonight that they believe in high density housing, a position that all of them have held while they are in Parliament, yet we haven't seen any increase in high density housing. What are you going to do about it, and why would we believe you would actually do it when we've seen years and years of failure to achieve that?
Sorry, it's just factually untrue. So the first point is that the Auckland government's reforms from 2009 onwards led to the Auckland Unitary Plan. National accelerated the Auckland Unitary Plan, which came into effect in 2016. One of the effects of that, I agree it's not perfect, one of the effects of that, and a lot of people don't like it, but it definitely has led to more housing. In fact, real rents, so rents after adjustments for inflation, real rents in Auckland are actually flat to falling right now as a result, many economists think, because of the upzoning in many parts of Auckland. So that is done by National, is now having an effect. You can see those effects later. Second point is, as I said in my speech, my earlier remarks, National and Labour passed the medium density residential zone law at the end of 2021, and we've also supported the National Policy Statement on Urban Development, which was a law directive through the councils that was put in place by Minister Twyford. Phil Twyford had many ideas about housing. Some of them were done, like Judy built. The MPSUD for councils is a good thing. It means that basically near public transport routes, which you have many in Auckland and you should have more, you can go up to 6 stories. That is in place right now, and it is working. And we support that, and we want to see more housing in our cities.
I'm sure he's expecting you to ask it. For a party that stands for freedom and individual property owner rights, why don't you support the right of property owners to build higher density housing?
So we did. So I think what Jack's referring to is the resource management and enabling housing reform that was pushed through in a hand-holding put by our exercise by Judy Collins and Labour back in 2021. National was desperate for a little while. But I'll tell you what, you can't plan your way to high densities. What you actually need is to... All the unitary plan provides the I'll give you a classic example. If you drive on Ponsonby Road now, there's provision there for multi-storey blocks all the way along Ponsonby Road. But until Watercare's finished the central interceptor, they can't have a single additional sewage connection to their main line. It's infrastructure. Now, what ACT has said is that if we give councils half the GST, 50% of the GST on new builds, that central government keeps for itself, that will produce $1 billion in revenue to cash flow urban density and urban redevelopment. At the moment, councils face all the costs, they've got no incentives. ACT says central government should share half the GST they collect on building with local government, and that will incentivise them to say yes to more consent, yes to more density, and give them the revenue to deliver the infra. It's in here. Thank you.
So actually what Simon's talking about there with regards to the Auckland unitary plan and the fact that more housing can be delivered is actually rather contrary to the point about density and density being done well, because the places that we are allowing development to occur and where we have protected development from not occurring are basically a map of, for lack of a better term, privilege in the city. So there's been a really great breakdown of where resource consents have been consented. Pretty sure Simon. There's been within 1 to 2 kilometres of the city centre, and then it drops kind of pretty much off the cliff between 2 and 5 kilometres, and then you get far higher resource consenting when you get further out. So that's why when you go out to the likes of Avondale and West Auckland, you'll see that there's a lot of density going up. It's why when you look in the city centre, there's a lot of density going up, but it's why when you look in the surrounding suburbs, of even including the likes of Ponsonby Road and my electorate and Epsom, that you don't see that density going up. That is because of something called special character. And this is why all of you should really care about local government and where the rubber hits the road with regard to these unitary plans and these amendments. Because unfortunately, still reflected in the unitary plan amendments as currently being tabled by council and progressed at the end of the last term of local government, there still is these special character protections. Interestingly enough, these are going to be going through the process as outlined in the housing density amendment legislation, which means that basically there's a backstop for the Minister of Housing, or rather the Minister for Environment, to say that they disagree with the approach that Auckland Council may have taken. So we're just going to have to wait and see.
This is a really good question, and one of the most critical policies to basically drive high density is a land value tax. Because what it does, it penalises land bankers, because the tax is applied just to the land. So if you have a piece of land, you will pay the same tax whether you have one house on it or an apartment block on it. So obviously, the best option is to build as many houses on a piece of land as possible. So land value tax is absolutely critical. We don't have it, so it doesn't drive that incentive around the productive use of land. It's not nothing like that at all, Jack. That's just a ludicrous thing to say, particularly from the I mean, that's just a law. But basically, that means just old, cold houses basically been around for a long time. But the important thing, and I think this is where we have to be a little bit careful talking to communities, is we need good transport links. There's no point whacking up apartment blocks if people can't get there. So, developing outlets from good transit zones is really critical, but we should have the ability to build denser housing. There is some fantastic stuff out there. It's going to get better and better. We can do more around funding support for developers who do actually want to deliver housing, because actually delivering the housing requires money, and obviously development finance is sometimes very challenging. We proposed a $3 billion housing fund for community housing associations to deliver houses and communities, and that piece of it is actually really critical.
It's very overwhelming being in this position. Sorry, green here, I'm just going with the colourful here for now.
So we have a lot of people's positions, like on lowering the voting age to 16, but I want to ask Chris and Michael specifically. Will you lower the voting age to 16 if you're in the successive government? No. Yes.
Sorry, I mean, Greens commission for a court commission. You can serve in the army, you can legally buy alcohol. There's a whole range of rights that we give to 18-year-olds. Our view is that consistency does have merit and is important in and of itself. And so you have a view, you ask my view, that's my view. National's policy is to keep providing age.
I'm a definite yes in terms of lowering it for local government elections, and open-minded and leaning towards yes in terms of general elections. My general posture on this issue is that if we can do more to engage more people in the democratic process, particularly as we deal with long-term issues, that's got to be good thing.
Let's do something just like that, okay?
Okay, so this Parliament condemned human rights abuses in Xinjiang, northwest China in 2021. Interestingly, it was the Green Party and ACT who were the sole parties willing to go far enough to describe it as a genocide. Labour and National only agree with a dampened version that expressed some sort of vague ethical concerns. Jerry Brownlee of National was particularly rudest when he called it like legitimate counter-terrorist measures. With further encroachments into Taiwan's airspace and China's disregard for the climate, among other things, it's evident that our intimate relationship with China will call into question at some point in the future. My question is for Labour and National. Given you've acknowledged these problems, do you intend to continue cultivating this close relationship we share with China? Or will you substantively act on the concerns echoed by parliaments across the world?
Good question. Genocide, I'll be very careful what I say. Genocide has, for those of you who are all students will know, genocide has a specific meaning in international law. Governments and parliaments have to be very careful about using that word. That is why the Parliament did not say that. I believe it is possible to have a relationship with China, which let's not forget is our largest trading partner, where New Zealand engages in mutual respect with China and raises issues of human rights, as successive governments, both National and Labour, have done, while simultaneously enjoying a close trade relationship and other areas of mutual interest. Ultimately, New Zealand stands up for the rule of law on the world stage. We believe in the international rule of law and rules-based international order, and successive governments from both National and Labour have always stood up for that in the context of independent foreign policy. I can't see that changing, and it was elected in October.
One of the things we take pride of in respect of our foreign policy is that it is values-led, and so what we will see from our government is that we've had really serious concerns about human rights abuses in China, that we have spoken directly to those, whether that's in statements that we've made ourselves or with like-minded countries around the world. In the world of international diplomacy, you've got to find your way to continue having relationships with countries while also being truthful with what you believe in. If I just speak to one other specific direct thing that we're working on at the moment that does speak to this issue, not just in respect to China but more generally. We've got around about 50 million people around the world who live in modern slavery, people who produce products that we currently buy in New Zealand who are literally in a condition of slavery, have no freedom in their lives whatsoever. So one of the commitments that we've made in this term of government is to progress modern slavery legislation, which is about putting some transparency on our supply chains, so that companies with the means to do so have to actually look at their supply chains and identify where there might be those issues in the goods and services that we consume within New Zealand. And that's one of the really practical things that we can do to deal with that issue broadly across our economy.
That's fine. This is a question for the top on the Greens, principally because I suspect we already know what everyone else's answer would be. Recently, a proposed amendment to our hate speech laws in order to expand them to cover religion has been slightly back down on, and it's been referred back to the Law Commission for further input. What are your party's respective positions on that bill generally?
That's a good question. As somebody who was intimately involved with the response to 15th of March in Christchurch and worked very closely with the survivors and the victims of that attack, that this is a delicate issue for many people. I think probably the government should have not been as aggressive as they were, saying that hate speech law will be passed before this election, which is what they said last year, and now they've kicked it to the Law Commission. I actually would have preferred it to go to the Law Commission first. I think that is the proper place for this to be considered, because it's not as straightforward as it looks. We know there are a number of acts, 5 at least, available to the police to carry out prosecutions if required, and often that is the problem. The police is not prosecuting certain crimes around hate speech. So I think our position is we definitely support it, but we want to see what the Law Commission comes back with.
So it is gutting that this has been decided to be one of the many cans kind of kicked to the curb. And what was proposed with regard to those amendments as well is that it was also really gutting how constrained that was, I know particularly for our remote communities, which I am one. That it was really gutting that we didn't see that reflected in the proposed amendment either. So yeah, long story short, I'm not our spokesperson on this issue. Boris government has done a lot of work and has offered a lot of leadership in this space. And I just also think it's really important for us to know what it is that we're talking about when we're talking about hate speech, because there's a lot of conflation with free speech. What we're talking about is people utilising words and acting and communicating in a way that incites and drums up violence towards other people, which can result in death. So that's what we're talking about here. And yeah, we need to have that discussion very rationally as a country, and it's gutting that it's also been very consumed by culture wars. I feel largely imported from America.
Very good critique.
Good. I just wanted to ask you guys a question for all the students here. You've all talked about cost of living and everything that you do. Personally, I haven't seen anything for anyone here regarding students specifically. A lot of us can't work full time, a lot of us study 40, 50 hours a week. What can everyone, as one policy that you will commit to, if you are in government, that will help students in this cost of living crisis?
Yeah. So the first thing that I would say is, so I've been at our tertiary education specialist experience for the past 5 years, and as I alluded to before in response to the broader economic question, one of the most gutting moments in the past 5 years, particularly in portfolio of tertiary education, is when COVID-19 was on our shores and the government was gearing up to spend 10 times the amount of money that it originally thought that it would need to spend pre-COVID, that it decided to cut back support for students, particularly for postgraduate student allowances and for the secondary extension fees free. At one time, when the government knew that we had to support our most vulnerable communities, it decided to kick students again to the curb. So what we've done, and I actually have made some really, with the power that we do have, we have made some movements in this space. So in 2020, people may recall that there were a number of instances with many university campuses where students had to make decisions in 48 to 72 hours about whether they were going to stay in halls or whether they were going to go home. That resulted in some of the universities having policies where they continued to try and charge students, and I then worked with university associations across the country to start what became the Student Accommodation Inquiry. People may not know that under Section 5B of the Residential Tenancies Act, there are exclusions. So who has renters' rights in this country? Those who live in student halls are among them. So we found through that inquiry, just absolutely honestly, a wild west with regard to the kind of rules and regulations out there for the operation of student accommodation. Through that process, we managed to get the creation of what's called a pastoral code for students. I found through hearings at select committees that none of our 8 universities have fully implemented that pastoral code, and once again, that's because we're not seeing that same focus on student well-being and welfare. So we were then trying to get through the Education Workforce Select Committee and full-on inquiry into the state of affairs with regards to students. Didn't manage to get consensus from all of the parties that were at the table. So then working with student associations, 34 of them from around the country, last year we went through a massive process and got 4,000 students around the country submitting to what became our inquiry into our people's inquiry into student wellbeing. That then was, we worked with an independent company who gave us statistically significant data and breakdowns of that. In a nutshell, we found that 2/3 of students regularly cannot afford the basics, and that the material situation that students live in today are far worse than they were even 10 years ago. The solutions to that are universal student allowance, they are rent controls, and they are implementing that pastoral care code of conduct and all our universities and polytechs.
One policy that we are completely committed to at the Oppourtunities Party is a universal basic income. That is all.
Two quick points. Economists don't always agree on many things, but there's a couple of things they generally almost overwhelmingly agree on together. One, free trade is good. Two, rent controls don't work. So we are two things we can do. One, increase housing supply so that rent continues to fall in real terms and make rents affordable. Second, the national will deliver moderate adjustments to taxation thresholds so that you can keep more of your own money.
So one of the most practical things that we've done as a government to address some of those cost of living questions I know everyone here will be feeling have been some of the changes that we've made around transport. So the half price of public transport and a reduction in fuel excise duty. If you are filling up a car, it pretty much means that every time you fill up your car, you're saving around about $17 on every single tank. If you're taking 2 bus journeys a day to get to and from uni, you're probably saving about $20 to $25 a week because of that half price public transport. Now we're running those through until the 30th of June. We're putting about extra $700 million to take that through the year. And then what we've said going forward from there is that we're going to look at what more we can do through the budget, which we deliver in May. And that's the point at which we'll be able to say what we're really committing to deliver as we get a bit closer to the election. So next time we come back later in the year, there'll be more on the table there. But we're doing practical stuff now. I know it's still tough, but those are policies that make a real difference for you.
Will you argue to the Finance Minister in favour of extending the public transport subsidy?
Yes. At the moment where every single minister is sitting down with the Minister of Finance to argue for our lives for all the policies that we think are best in our
So where does that stack up on your priority?
Making sure that public transport is more accessible and affordable for people is one of the most important things for me. We've made that commitment tangible with some of those changes that I've just talked about, and I do want us to do more as we move forward. We've got to make sure that we target money in public transport to give people the biggest benefit. So one of the things about half price does it benefits everyone here. It also benefits me. I got on my 25 bus down law school this morning. So one of the questions that I'm looking at is are there ways of targeting that? The other thing we know in Tamaki Makaurau, we have real transport poverty because we have whole communities, often low-income communities, where there's really poor public transport. So as well as taking action on fares, one of the things we need to invest in is getting more services into those areas as well as paying our bus drivers more because they do an amazing job and we need them to be able to run the services, and that's something that's really
So really interesting to hear Mr. Michael talk about half-price public transport and so reducing the fuel tax. I read the paper that his officials presented to the Minister. In fact, we debated it last week in the House. What the Minister's officials said is that rather than giving a whole lot of money to people who drive cars, what they could do, in fact, be far better to actually target transfer payments through the welfare system to people who are most in need. And when that looks at the way that the government policy currently applies to students, there's a transfer of about $750 million a year from some of the wealthiest to some of the wealthiest people in New Zealand. I would say that includes students currently studying at university. The problem is the people who are missing out are people who are and they can't get here because actually they are not enabled to. So we're next thinking about what we can do for students, it's not just the ones that are here. How can we get more people into the education system so that they can reach their potential? And that actually involves delivering a better cost of living to young people so they can afford to come and live in cities, so they can afford to use their own car if they need to. Like the young woman told me she's driving an hour and 30 every day from Rama to get here because the accommodation is too expensive. They're really difficult trade-offs for young people, and we should make sure that those trade-offs are as cheap as possible.
Politicians seem to like to talk for a long time, so I'll just be really quick like we've asked. But I think we would do, we've already said 20,000 is no tax, so that would be helpful. But I'd also go further. There's lots of students I know that can't finish their degree because the last year isn't covered, and they have to go out to work. So that's what we would actually make sure that they had that extra year to complete their university degree.
Hang on, just to be 100% clear, the fee's free for 3 years?
What do you mean by when you say the last
yeah, by 3 years, do you mean 3 years free?
There's a quota for, I haven't got the exact facts, but I think it's 200 weeks where you have the student allowance, and then it is cut off. So I know that there's lots of students that actually can't finish their degree, so they need that to have that top up.
But not fees free. I'm sorry, we're running out of time, so what we might do is I'm going to wrap up in just a minute so that you can all come and harass the candidates as soon as we finish. But what I'll do is just to wrap it all up, I think I'll give you each 30 seconds, like literally 30 seconds, to give me a favourite policy of yours that you haven't mentioned tonight. I think that might be a good way to work through things. Raph, you hit that? Okay. Raph, Manji.
I'll be very quick. The policy that I haven't mentioned tonight, which we think is going to be quite groundbreaking, is called Project Teal. It's about the future. And you can find out what it is in March.
So Jack said our favourite policy.
Favourite policies that you haven't mentioned tonight?
Drug law reform, baby! What I feel one of the most anti-scientific, anti-evidence and unjust pieces of law that we currently have on our books. And frankly, all of the politicians, 80% of New Zealanders who smoke cannabis by the time they're 21 years old, the majority of politicians are on the record saying that they do have. They're hypocrites, as long as it stays there.
A policy that I haven't talked about tonight is a whole approach to government, which is what we in the National Party call social investment. Social investment is about using the data that we have at our disposal inside government. You don't all know this, but the government has so much information about you and your friends and family. It might shock some of you and alarm you, and to be honest, it alarms me a little bit. But we can use what that data shows about the intractable social problems that we have in New Zealand to target government resources and also civil society and non-government resources and drive results at a local level. You're going to hear us talk more about that in a little bit of social business.
If you ask any principals in New Zealand what has been the most impactful policy they have seen in about the last 30 years, they'll tell you it's free school lunches for kids in our schools. It's been a policy that for many of our lowest income kids has meant that those kids get a decent meal every day. That's good for them. It means that they're actually able to learn, they're actually able to enjoy school, and it gets them there. It's a policy that makes a difference. It speaks to our values as a Labour government, which is about treating everyone with dignity and respect, and it's giving those kids a real opportunity in life that they otherwise don't miss out on.
Waiting times in the emergency department are around 6 hours in some places. It's estimated that there's about $14 billion needs to be spent on upgrading our hospital system. And when we look at how the government can possibly fund it, instead of funding it, they spent $500 million during the COVID pandemic on a health system reform that's just cost the chairman of that health reform his job today. What we're going to say, look, we don't care who owns the buildings that the patients go in. We can actually attract private capital from ACC to fund another bill to fund the best. To fund the best hospital facilities in the world. I was in Canada last year. They faced the same problems New Zealand did 20 years ago. They solved it by attracting billions and billions of dollars in long-term investments from your super fund, your KiwiSaver, your ACC to actually build the buildings that we need to give us first world health care.
I'm going to do two because I'm a very broad, it's not going to change. Mental health is a very strong priority, mental health, because nobody can train people mental health. Because they are pushing policies that actually don't need to be in education. That's why we're failing. Our children can't read and write properly because there's way too many other agendas and different groups.
Helen can elaborate for a couple of minutes. Okay, we can keep things moving. The candidates hopefully can stay around for a few minutes if you want to come and bail and not ask them any more questions. Thank you for your very thoughtful questions. That was fantastic. Please will you join me in putting your hands together to thank Life at Work, Chris Bishop,